Hey guys, it's Kevin and the Murphy guys. We're reviewing. This is a movie that I was interested in seeing for the most part. It's taken me a while to finally review it, but now I have finally seen it, and that is none other than 12 Strong. And what 12 Strong is essentially about is we center on all of these different CIA paramilitary officers as well as U.S. Special Forces, and it basically takes place roughly after the September 11th attacks. They basically are sent to Afghanistan immediately after to try to maybe negotiate something with them and try to figure out really what's going on. This is essentially what started the Iraqi war and all that stuff, and that's really all I'm going to say. So 12 Strong, generally, to be honest with you, I really was not looking forward to this movie that much. To me, this just looked like a very boring, middle-of-the-road January movie that was just going to be one of those war films that doesn't add anything new to the genre. It had a good cast, but it just looked really boring, especially the fact that it was in January. I really was not, thinking this was going to turn out that great at all. But it started getting more positive reception. That really did surprise me. Out of all the films to get positive reception, this was definitely not one that, was a possibility. Out of all the ones to come out, this is one of the ones that would get a more negative rep, and it really hasn't. A lot of people have actually really been enjoying this movie. And I'll say this, 12 Strong is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's still not a good movie, though. I think this movie's simply just okay. It's alright. It's really nothing that great, but it does have some stuff that impressed me more than I expected to. We're getting into that right now, starting off with the cast. And right off the bat, that is actually one of the best things about this movie. The acting in here is actually really great. I think, honestly, everyone did a really great job. Without doubt, though, the standout here is Chris Hemsworth as Captain Mitch Nelson, which is an interesting role for Hemsworth because it seems that any role he takes that's not Thor doesn't really bode well for him, and this is really the first one in a while that I think it's the opposite. He actually did a really great job here. This character, you really see him as a leader. He's very rootable. You can tell that he really wants to, do something about the situation. He's very determined in that way, and you do care for him in that sense, and he does carry the film quite well. Some of his best scenes are, just seeing something as simple as the dirt on his face and seeing how, again, how involved he is with this situation and seeing him really try to put an end to it. And I think he really did a great job here. I thought I really did enjoy his performance in the film. And like I said, this is definitely his best performance, probably since his turn as Thor, honestly. He really did a great job here. The rest of the cast here I don't really have too much to say about. Michael Shannon does a really great job as the chief warrant officer. He and Chris Hemsworth do actually have some nice scenes together. Michael Peña, he does a really great job as the comedic relief, essentially. That's really why he's here. Everyone else is pretty, is pretty good here. Rob Riggle, Trevante, Rhodes, Navid, Negahban, there's really no one that I didn't like in this movie. Navid Negahban, we'll get to his character in a little bit, but he really, you can tell, is really just chewing up so much of the scenery in this role, and he's got a lot of really silly lines, things like that. We'll get to that with the writing, but like I said, everyone else does a really good job for the most part. Now let's get to the directing and the writing, because once again, that is something that surprisingly worked really well. I am not familiar with this director prior to this movie, but after this, I really want to see Nicolai Fuglsig. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Sorry if I probably just butchered that name, but nevertheless, I really want to see him helm another action film, because he really does know what he's doing here. The action scenes that we get here are really well filmed. You get that intensity. You feel like you're right there in that situation. He really shows you how prevalent this really was, and he does a really great job capturing that. I really thought his directing was very solid here. There's some comedic moments they did handle very well. Just his directing overall, I think, really did elevate this entire film. A lesser director, this movie really would not have turned out well at all, but his directing, like I said, really just brings the film to new heights. Unfortunately, as good as the acting and the directing is, though, the writing kind of sours the entire film, because the writing in general, aside from the performances, this is the most by-the-book war film you could possibly get. There really isn't anything that different when it comes to, you know, from a story perspective. You've seen this a million times. You know, it's a bunch of men who, they got families back home, and you know, they're in this specific job and they're doing this specific thing, and that really is all there is to the characters. Again, I'm sure you guys weren't expecting it, but don't go to this movie for very in-depth characters, because there's really not much to them. Chris Hemsworth, as good as he is in the movie, his entire character essentially is that, oh, I gotta get back to my family, and oh, my family's waiting for me. And I've said this before, that's not a bad motivation. In fact, it's a good motivation, you know, going back to your family, but it's just a very one-note and very easy motivation. There really isn't much else to it besides that, and I did kind of want, again, because of how good Hemsworth was, he did elevate the role for me, but I really did want a little more to his character. I think they could have definitely done more with him. A lot of these characters are pretty much sidelined. Besides Chris Hemsworth and Michael Shannon, everyone else just kind of bled into one another. No one else really stuck out to me except for those two actors. And again, it's because of how great they really are in their roles. Michael Peña has like a little something, but there's really not much to him. Trevante Rhodes is completely wasted here. I mean, especially coming off the heels of Moonlight. Ooh, there really is not much for him going with this movie. And it's unfortunate because he's a really good actor, and he does do a good job in this movie. He just doesn't really have a lot to do here. So that definitely was disappointing. Rob Riggle, you know, he doesn't really have a lot to do either. There's a lot of talent here that is very much wasted, and that definitely did disappoint me. The other big problem with this movie, though, is that it is kind of boring at points. The first two acts, especially, are very slow, and they're not very interesting because of the fact that these characters are not really all that interesting when there isn't an action scene going on, or there isn't a conversation about, you know, their lives or something like that, and it's just them kind of sitting around and just talking about things. It's just not very interesting, and again, I really felt they could have improved that with the writing. I understand the film is slow-moving, but it's slow-moving for the sake of being slow-moving, and again, the situation that we got going on here, maybe it was this slow. Maybe it was just a very sort of gradual, sort of attack. Maybe that's really what it was. You know, maybe it was really that slow of a process, but the movie just didn't make it as interesting as I think it could possibly be, and it just didn't really work for me. Also, the villains in this movie, I understand that they're the Taliban or whatever in Afghanistan, but these villains are so hammy, honestly. They feel like something right out of a Marvel movie. Like, honestly, it feels like one of those, you know, just really overpowered villains who are just so cheesy and they want to take over the world. And I mean, literally, that's what the Taliban wanted to do. They wanted to fuck with the world and things like that. They still do. I mean, they're still out there and things like that. But this movie, really, I didn't think was taking it too seriously at all. They really go over the top with it. And again, Navid Negahban, he tries with the role as best as he can, but there's just some really dumb stuff going on with his character, and sometimes it was a little bit hard to take that seriously. I'm not gonna lie. I do think that they did overdo it a lot they did overdo it a bit when it came to the, you know, Vice President of Afghanistan in this movie. He really was very cartoony, and it was just very hard to take him seriously at points. Again, when the film is focusing on the conflict, though, it is actually really interesting. And again, that is due to the cinematography. The cinematography here is great. I can't believe I'm saying that, but the cinematography here is fantastic. I thought that, again, Rasmuth Videbake really does have a pretty keen eye when it comes to how to, you know, how to showcase, you know, war and things like that, and how to showcase all these, you know, bodies being blown up and things like that. And they really don't hold back. Like I said, you really do feel like you're in this situation. The last, like, 30 minutes are extremely thrilling, and I really was getting locked into it, I have to say. When the war stuff is going on, it is very well handled, and that's something that, again, very much did surprise me. The score here is very bland. There's really not much to it. but again, the cinematography I do think did help this film overall. And then the editing. This movie is over 2 hours long, and you really do feel it. I honestly really did feel the length throughout this movie. The only times I didn't feel the length, like I said, was the third act. The third act did elevate this film overall, and thank God for it, because the first 2 acts I was in pretty utter boredom, honestly. I really was pretty bored during this, especially the second act of this movie. It's extremely slow. There's really not much going on there. Luckily, the third act kicks in, and you know, it doesn't let you go from there. Once the action starts up, it pretty much is consistent throughout the rest of the film, and I think they definitely did do a really good job with that. Also, this is just a nitpick, but like I said, throughout the film, Captain Nelson, you know, he's constantly talking about his family and how he has to get back to them. And without spoiling anything, once we get to the ending of the movie, you know, once they get out of the situation, and whatever, because again, I'm not going to spoil exactly what happened to them, but once the film does wrap up, they don't really go back to it in the way you were expecting them to. And it did disappoint me a little bit, because we're spending so much time on his family, but his family, while they're kind of in the forefront, they don't really feel like an afterthought. It just feels like, again, these characters were very underdeveloped, and they could have definitely done a lot with them. And if that was done as good as it was, maybe I would have felt a little more of an emotional impact, but I just didn't. And we're seeing this movie where clearly they want us to feel something, and I just didn't feel as grave an impact as I think the movie really wanted me to. So like I said, guys, 12 strong. It's definitely better than I expected to be. It's definitely has a lot better acting. It's got a director who clearly does have a talent when it comes to action. It does have some really entertaining war scenes, and I definitely was impressed by that. But it's got a story that's very by the numbers, and you've seen it a million times before, and there's really nothing all that different to it. It's nothing I'm going to remember, unfortunately. It's not, like I said, it's not what I was expecting it to be, but it still is pretty slow. And those first 2 acts are honestly kind of a slog to get through, honestly. So like I said, 12 strong. It's nothing all that great. I am going to give 12 strong overall a C. So over, guys, I'm going to review 12 strong. Let me know what you guys thought of this movie overall, left your thoughts in it. That's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy. We'll see you guys in my next video, and then we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.